Hello and welcome to We Are the Deluge, a spoiler-free chapter-by-chapter podcast about the climate change novel The Deluge by Stephen Markley. We are your co-hosts, Emily Crandall and John McMahon, VIP ticket holders to the Fire Festival of the Climate Crisis. Today we are discussing the first part of The Siege, set in 2034, a chapter from a question mark point of view, which we are presenting in vaguely chronological form.
Question mark point of view. It's very relevant to my first set of notes.
Same. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength here. So this is a new gimmick for us structurally, but
Right.
this is a weird chapter. So
like a 50 some odd page chapter that is sort of organized chronologically, although not perfectly, which we will, I assume, discuss.
Absolutely.
So for our meta gimmick, we decided to go through our kind of notes in order. So to take you through the chapter as we experienced it, and also somewhat arbitrarily separated by dates.
Yes, perfect. And I think we will. So we should say that we are going to cover through page 521, at the top of page 521. So until May 20th.
Great. Yeah.
And then we'll cover the rest of the siege next episode.
Perfect. So in true spirit of our podcast, we'll begin each dated section with a little summary.
Yeah.
So I went with our podcast and the book converge as Kate calls on everyone to occupy DC, yelling, "We are the Deluge."
Oh my God. I did this. She did say the thing. The concert for the climate becomes a deluge of occupying creativity and power, but will it become a trickle and go down as the most embarrassing protest action in modern memory?
Oh my God. Wow. This is going to be fun. I can already tell.
I think maybe we both started our notes with a question about perspective or POV.
Yeah, it is super unclear who is writing this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And we get right away on the first page, like 3 characters that were like, are these characters now? Right?
Yes, precisely. And that's definitely what I thought the first time through.
Yeah. We get like names and a little bit of background.
Yes.
And sort of like perhaps a new, I don't know, like insight into a little bit.
Yes, I think so. So we get like a kind of omniscient setup, which could have been from any character, commenting on the weather. Of course, a light rain fell and they came by the thousands up through the tunnels of the metro and crossing the Potomac, surging along the sidewalks on their way to the National Mall. Very suggestive, watery language to follow the rain. And then we get Quentin, and then we get Walls, and then Kelly. We kind of get Kelly.
Yeah.
And then it's mostly like third-person omniscient narration, which we have not experienced at all in the novel so far.
No. Yeah, I remember feeling really kind of like whiplashed at this, and that when on the first read I was like, wait, who is writing this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think my guess, or one guess about what Markley is trying to do, is to have the jarring effect on the reader that the siege / occupation of the mall has on the nation, on the political establishment, on the people that are there doing the besieging and occupying. So like this is such a shock and so out of the ordinary. And Kate, of course, is narrating why that's the case in her speech and then in her media appearance towards the end of the first part of the chapter. And I think maybe we're meant as readers to experience that.
I did think the language that the omniscient narrator uses that sometimes is really hilarious. And like even that opening line is like, so what's the right adjective to describe the prose there? It's like they came by the thousands up through the tunnels of the metro. Like who, the rats? Like
it's self-consciously writerly.
Yes.
And like there's, I think, a moment where you maybe think it's another surprise Matt chapter.
Right.
Even if it's just the opening line, but also because he's the most self-consciously writerly character. And it's simultaneously, like, as you pointed out, this is also just over and over again throwing up different possible non-point of view point of views, right? We get a couple of sentences about is it a marine biologist from Alaska, and the like anarchist from North Carolina, and Letitia Hamilton, right? This 11-year-old girl, later on in this first couple parts of the chapter. So it's like all of these are possible point of views, and there's a little bit of funny something happening here because still, even though this is a Kate chapter, it's not a Kate POV chapter. Right. So Mark Lee's kind of pushing that like structural like impediment, also like creative opportunity as far as it'll go.
But we do get some of like Kate internally, which is new. To, like we've only ever got Matt speculating about what she could possibly be thinking and her telling him what she's thinking and him hoping there's a gap between the two, right?
Yeah.
And now we get somehow access to her a little bit. And I'm curious when we get to that part, like what we make about, I hate like questions of authenticity, but like, is that really Kate is another kind of interesting puzzle here, I think too.
Because the somehow in your sentence is doing a lot of work.
But I also think there's an interesting POV. The POV question here, the omniscient narrator, is really interesting because sometimes very lightly and very rarely the narrator sort of seems to take a POV, but not fully. So like we get a little bit of what's going on in the administration, but the POV seems to be primarily focused on like the agitation and the action in a not entirely unsympathetic way.
That's a good way to put it.
But like I'm thinking about on page 497 when the narrator is telling us about how big the crowd is, right? The narrator says aerial photography estimates put the crowd size at about 105,000 people. Not bad, but keep in mind Trump's much disputed inauguration, right? Like who is like it's it's a little tongue in cheek there, a little bit like a wink to whatever assumed audience this hypothetical mysterious narrator has.
But like who is the addressee of this question mark narrator is also part of the question, because like
keep in mind.
keep in mind in particular. And like
very funny.
For a book that will try to provide an explanation, I think, I'm trying to decide how much cryptic foreshadowing to do here. For a novel that I think will provide an overview of how we get the different chapters and why they're the forms that they are towards the very end in book 5, this is still, I think, the most mysterious of them all. I think that's what I will say.
That works, yeah. Maybe some other POV stuff we can just flag as we like move through. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, I want to make one little note on 496. The mysterious narrator tells us that the concert kicks off with Beyonce, Jack White, and Gary Clark Jr. performing a blues rewrite of the national anthem, which this book came out in 2023, and Cowboy Carter did not come out until 2024.
Great point.
Even the first leaked, the first single came out in early 24, and the full album wasn't fully dropped until later in 2024. So did Mark Lee.
So Mark Lee also has Beyonce omniscience?
Yeah.
Incredible. It's not my cultural artifact, although I do want my cultural artifact to come very early. I would be interested in the Beyonce, Jack White, Gary Clark Jr. national anthem and Rockin' in the Free World.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So good.
I would listen to that more than I would like to admit.
Have we met this rapper yet who appears?
Yes. Vaguely.
How do we pronounce his name?
Haidukai is what I've been doing.
Yeah. Okay. What I noticed was when I read over it really fast, it sort of looked like Hayduke which is one of the main characters from Edward Abbey's Monkey Wrench Gang.
Oh.
And I was like,
that's got to be a reference.
Is there a wink here?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a Mark Lee wink. And in the universe of this novel, it is Haidukai's wink to the Monkey Wrench Gang. I'm going to drop my cultural artifact here while we're on this conversation.
Yes.
And that is the 2024 film Trap, written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Because I'm going to give
I did not see this. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to spoil the premise, but that's all from this movie. So
You can spoil it for me. I
if
don't
you
care.
want to go unspoiled into Trap, I think the trailer spoils the premise, so don't worry about it. So it's a film in which a large concert featuring one of the most important pop stars, played by M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, who is a musician in real life, which is funny, is a ruse for something else entirely. And like,
Oh.
so there's a structural similarity, obviously, where the climate concert for the climate, No Time Left, is this ruse for the eventual besieging and occupation of the capital. And more specifically, I think that we see this is more so in the April 4th part. We get Tom, but also Kate reflecting on like their romantic and personal relationships. And like there's this question of kind of family structure, and also
Mm,
this like question of when and where is violence going to happen
yes.
throughout this entire chapter of the Deluge, and questions about like family and kinship and the normative family and all of that, and the question of like when and where might violence appear is also central to Trap, and the like intertwining of those two things in some ways even more closely than those two particular dynamics are intertwined in this chapter of the Deluge.
Wow. I'm gonna go suggest to Matt that we watch Trap later, and he's gonna be like, "What? Why?"
I Trap got a lot of shit when it came out. I had an incredible time watching Trap.
Okay, that's really interesting. Put a pin in that for when we get to my cultural
Okay.
artifact.
It's also part of the Josh Hartnett essence.
Oh,
So
well, yes, we love that. We are all here for that for sure. Yeah. So I was thinking, I don't know how this dovetails with that culture artifact, but on this like page where we get a kind of introduction to what the organizers had hoped for in terms of the turnout, I was really
Mhm.
struck by, and it's sort of a glancing comment, but like there hasn't been a weather event in the world of the novel in a little bit. There's been other disruptive events, and so climate has sort of like faded out. So the concert is no longer like concert for the climate for a lot of people is sort of like, what? Why?
Which is, I mean, it's a very accelerated experience of time and duration for like
Yeah.
the people who live within the world of the Deluge, because the flood is only 2 years ago at this
Right.
point. The fires are 3 years ago at this
Yeah.
point. Like, we're not actually that far removed, especially as readers,
No.
from those events,
Especially as readers, right? Because
especially as readers.
those are the tense action chapters, right?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
And the heart-wrenching ones too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I'm
the costumes and the familiar scene and the familiar slogans I thought was just really well done by Mark. This is again an
yeah.
example of Mark Lee having a playful grasp of what is beautiful, but also like corny about the left.
Yeah. New World Solidarity from the Clean Energy Labor Coalition.
Yeah.
I liked a rabbi, a priest, and an imam
Mhm.
walk into a bar to save the earth. Like, I
Exactly.
feel like that punchline should have actually at least been a punchline, but it's like really perfect.
Yeah.
I also really liked the sea of plastic ponchos garnering real-time ridicule on social media due to the petroleum used to manufacture them. A lot of LOLs in this like slice of life of the concert we get kind of before Kate drops the bombshell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop my theory in here too, because it's on
Ooh.
498 where this happens.
Okay.
So it is the question mark narrator of this chapter describing Haidukai. And it's
Uh-huh.
particularly this last line about what it feels like to be at this concert. This is the top of 498. That cosmic dust quality of live music descended on the audience, conjuring belonging and camaraderie from absolute scratch.
This is one of the other like lines of prose of this mysterious narrator where I was like, wow,
What's
this
happening?
is
Yeah,
so
the,
good. Yeah.
the cosmic dust. And so I propose as the theory for this chapter Kathleen Stewart's Ordinary Affects,
Ooh.
because her book Ordinary Affects, which is written in a very experimental style for theory, broadly speaking,
Hmm.
but it's all about like, it's about charges, it's about sensations, it's about current, it's about live wires. It's kind of both literal and metaphorical and theoretical
Mhm.
about the way that like the connections and charges between bodies or between bodies and things functions to shape like the worlds of people and how they then navigate as like affective sensing beings through that world. And there's like Stewart, I think, is playing in the broad like realm of affect theory with this particular notion of like how much intentionality can there be or not be to like
Mhm.
affective charges, let's say. And I think she's trying to like chart out a course that is slightly different from, say, someone like Brian Masumi or Patricia Clough in terms of
Mhm.
thinking about intentionality or the lack thereof. But what I think is most interesting about Stewart in the context of this chapter is that here we have like before Kate is like, well, here's what we're actually doing. We
Mhm.
get this sense of the camaraderie, the belonging camaraderie conjure, which is a great
Mhm.
verb, good affect theory verb
Yeah.
or theory verb generally from absolute scratch. So it's like, okay, so here are the bodily sensations slash cosmic dust that build some sort of nascent connection between the people in this crowd. And like, that's a very affect theory sort of thing. But what this chapter then does or asks is what happens when you try to like orchestrate that or like choreograph, to borrow from Daniel Hanley, who's borrowing from Audre Lorde, that sort of like charge between bodies or relationship between bodies and the sensations that produces in the like live connections that are kind of open-ended and only partially formed or inchoate or something like that.
Mhm.
And that this chapter then is about, well, what would it mean to try to like to build the theory on top of the theory, like channel those sort of affective charges or live wires through something like Empire by Heart and Agree, or through
Right.
something like Bill Connolly's work on like swarming or something like that. Like
Mhm.
what happens when we take the affect and direct it, or we interpolate it through these other kind of theoretical engagements with what happens to technologically mediated
Mhm.
selves and subjectivities and affects living within empire. And like
Yeah.
not only how are they dominated, but also like what might they do, right,
Yeah.
as beings, as bundles of affects or whatever in response, including for like Heart and Negri through some of the very same technologies that are the things doing the like desubjectivizing or doing the dominating or whatever. And so like
Mhm.
I was just thinking about like what it means to like read Stewart through some of this other work
Yeah.
as like a useful parallel for what the organizers of the siege do through the affects created by the concert.
Yeah, and I actually think like to go from that opening like invoking of affect through from there to Kate's speech
Yes.
is really useful, right? Cuz she pulls on those
Mm-hmm.
affects, right? And I think like I don't know, like some of the even italicization of the omniscient narrator slash Markley is like very much tapping into that. And it's
Yeah.
like what and that later we get from Kate and Tom that they weren't ever sure at all that it would work, right?
Right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and in part because I think they don't understand Liza's Occupy AI, which we'll get to.
Definitely.
But I think also because if the if nothing was spontaneously conjured, then there
Mm-hmm.
would have been nothing to direct, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, in part, they could have planned it to the down, to every whatever dotted I and cross
Yeah.
T, and like
Which
without
they
that,
did.
right? But without whatever cosmic dust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Kelly is a kind of example of precisely that. Like
yeah.
she's enamored with Kate, and we get this paragraph. Where's this? The top of 501. Kelly Pasquina
Hmm.
had loved Kate Morris since she first learned of her as a middle schooler. And the moment her idol stepped on stage, she begun to tingle. She did not care a whit about any of the scandals, the gossip, or the attacks from the left, right, or center. There were some people you would ride for, come what may. Now, listening to her, she clutched her hands in front of her mouth as if in prayer and let
Hmm.
the tears pour shamelessly from her eyes. Like, that's the thing that has to be conjured and then orchestrated.
Yeah.
And Kate's
And
able to
like,
do it.
and Kate's doing it also through she's pulling on the affect at the same time as she's doing like a kind of green Marxist like analysis of the
Yes,
crisis, right?
absolutely.
She's saying like that building is ours, right? It's like a different definition of democracy, even too, right? Like what belongs to the people, like we need to build new energy infrastructure. We need to reinvent agriculture. We need to put everyone to work in high paying, meaningful jobs, right? So like it's like you can't do environment without justice, right? So this is her like fuck you to like what a Fierce Blue Fire has sort of become, what the
Yes.
administration has become, what people have sort of bargained away in their deal making right behind closed doors. And it works, right?
It does. And I thought,
Not
I
at
mean,
first, but
not at first is right. Although, like, it has to have happened in order, and the narrator raises this possibility. Like, it took a while for the speech to really circulate. There's something about the speech that I think is worth contrasting with the Vanity Fair profile by Munitsa from back in book 2, where we also get a Kate speech as one of the centerpieces of that. And there are a lot of things that are similar, particularly this like linking of climate, democracy, justice, right? Like those are the 3 things she links in the Vanity Fair profile speech and that are still a centerpiece of this particular speech. But there's also the way she starts this speech is very, very different because it's a little bit grappling with her age, right? And the fact that she's, in her late 30s at this point, I guess, and grappling with like the failure of, yeah, seriously, I've seen it. I do not like this. And don't perceive me, Kate Morrison, Stephen Markley.
And omniscient narrator.
And omniscient narrator, yeah. And she like, and this is, I think you pointed to a question of authenticity. I'm not sure how much Kate actually like feels this. Well, what the fuck did I do? I failed, or the movement failed, or I don't know how much she actually felt like, oh, we'd be able to do this in 5 years and then like be back drinking beers at the bar the rest of the time. And so like there's this question both of as rhetorical strategy, but also maybe as a clue or not into Kate's personality or like deep core self that frames the then familiar like green Marxist speech.
Right. Like what does beginning with a kind of admission, right, of her own fear, how does that then make the green Marxist platform like more accessible or something like that to her audience? I wanted to propose a line from her speech as a title.
Okay.
On 500, the opening, we are met with this unthinkable nightmare befalling our planet. So I wanted to propose this unthinkable nightmare as a title.
That's really good. And that will very much tail with my own title proposal.
I'm sensing a combination title on the horizons.
So. Yeah.
Do we want to flag anything else in her speech?
I mean, only I think it's worth noting the fire and water imagery of the speech as like the bookends to, and now the siege is beginning, right? Because it's like we run into the fire, italicized to your point from earlier, that is her transition into being like, here's what we're going to do. And then that's on 502. And then on the next page, it's 503. We are the deluge, right? So we have the fire water as the beginning and like kind of the like middle or end of explaining what's going to happen.
And then right before the end of her speech, we get a little blip of a kind of internal monologue from a cop.
Yes.
From Master Patrol Officer Andrea Sanchez, an undercover with DC Metro Police, who I think we're supposed to read as like a cop with a good heart.
Yeah.
Who doesn't kind of know what to do. And we don't see her kind of target anyone who's a clear danger until later.
And later, we even have a tiny bit of internal thoughts of her again, where she's like, well, I would rather go patrol the white supremacists trying to get into DC than the people at the concert occupation.
Right. Because at least I understand what the danger is there, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Okay, what comes next in our...
I mean, just about this notion that like we're going to be uncompromising in our nonviolence.
Yeah.
And I think one question that I actually had like several points throughout my notes is, what would Shane think of what Kate is doing here?
Yeah.
And this question about like what precisely Kate means by nonviolence, what it means to be uncompromising in one's nonviolence is, I think, important.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I love this fact that like there's the weirdness of the concert continuing as they build this occupation out. And more specifically, like they are using the infrastructure of the police in several different forms against them.
Yeah.
Right, against the police. It's like, okay, well, you built all these barriers to like keep us in. We're going to use that to keep you out. Right. There's, as we'll get into this as we get into Liza's Occupy AI, this kind of question of like how they're using the communications infrastructure and knowledge of the tactics of the police like against them and all of that kind of stuff. And then, I mean, and this makes me think also of like, what is Occupy as a cultural artifact, right? As I think thing. But kind of one question for you is like, what does the language of siege kind of conjure for you, and why do you think we call this a siege?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like my knee jerk reaction is like a low tech war.
Yeah.
Where like trenches and boots on the ground, or like pirates.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like, you know, our false notions of like what medieval warfare is like. It's Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. Like this is
like you know, a defensive army like guarding the posts of the wall of the castle, and then like a sea of enemy combatants just like pouring over the hill, overwhelming, right? And usually I feel like the ones sieging are the bad guys, though, in a lot of like kind of popular constructions of the siege. The siege is usually the tactic used by those who have less moral scruples, you know?
No, but that's precisely. And also the siege scrambles the notion of who's on offense and who's on defense.
Yeah, totally. It's really evocative, for sure.
Yeah.
I also wanted to flag on 504, we get one little kind of disruption of the temporality of the siege.
Please.
And we get a couple other ones, but this one really kind of jumped out at me. So this is like groups of severe-looking blue bands station themselves outside the entrances to each of the buildings within their perimeter. The National Gallery of Art, the National Air and Space Museum, for instance, would be closed for the foreseeable future. So like we know now that this is being told at least from the vantage point of some future point, some future foreseeable. I don't know. Something that is foreseen in the context of the siege, right?
I mean,
like that sentence really jumped out at me. I was like, it breaks the chronology.
It does. I mean, I think this is a little bit I don't know, like a Deluge the virtual question about like how this presentist narrator, whatever it or they are, can have a foreseeable future.
Right. Yeah. And it's super interesting because we get the rest of it sort of like unfolding actually in almost quite chronological order, right? Like we get when they break into, right, the more people join, we're kind of getting into April 4th here, right? The more streets become possible to sort of block off. So it's like interesting to think about the future point where the National Gallery of Art and the National Air and Space Museums are not close somehow. I don't know. It just like really jumped out at me.
Yeah. And kind of like, in some ways, one of my questions is like, how did Mark Lee think of this? Right? Because it's like, and also if you thought of this, should he be a part of, I don't know, Extinction Rebellion or something? Like maybe he is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's like this requires not only like literary imagination, but it requires such perspicacious political imagination paired with like a mastery over the infrastructure necessary to bring that political imagination to some kind of reality. It's like, I think I just wanted to say is I think this is as impressive a creative feat of world building as like Ursula Le Guin or N.K. Jemisin or George R.R. Martin or like any of these people we think of as those who are able to build such complex and rich worlds that are reflective in some form, even if obtusely, like abstrusely, of our own.
Yeah, totally. And I think that leads us into Occupy AI really nicely because we get like a little bit more insight here into how the identity prediction analysis actually works from the perspective of someone using it specifically for good, right? To like rally people to the cause. And we get two like sides of how it works here, right? We get the kind of like the executive committees walking through and talking through who the AI targets and like how it recruits them. And then we also get the little bit of the POV of these specific little recruits, right? Saying like, you get the call, you get the text, right? Like Kelly shows Walt the text that she got or whatever. So he's like, oh crap, she's been recruited, right? And we learn eventually that he sort of gets recruited just from having stayed there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he becomes a data point, right? He becomes a Marine from Maryland, not Walt, right?
And we get some Quentin's experience of what this meant as well. And because it's like, and it's the simultaneity in this chapter of, and this gets to the question of the temporality of the chapter, it is able to look past before the events of the concert and siege themselves to talk about like the thoroughly anonymous, insulated training of a highly disciplined like cadre of using Occupy AI.
I like
no, go ahead.
No, you. Yeah.
While keeping Kate, Liza, Seth, Tony, Matt, right, like removed, like the blue bands have been highly trained, highly like pinpointed using the IPA. Yes. And meanwhile, it appears to the outside that Kate, Liza, Seth, Tony, Matt had only been doing the concert, right? So like there's this firewall between the two, hypothetically.
Yeah. And I think it's like interesting because we know that Shane has, right, access to, or 6 Degrees at least has access to like a super high tech kind of disruption that's part of their low tech operation, right? And now we know that the same is true of this concert, right? And ostensibly of a Fierce Blue Fire the whole time.
I mean, it does raise that question.
Yeah.
About like what they were doing.
And then like we know that what's the Sustainability Future Coalition? What's that?
Sustainable Future Coalition.
Like we know they all use it, right? Like corporations.
Yeah.
Right. And we learn kind of a little bit more about Victor Love's
we sure do.
deployment of that here too.
Yeah.
I want to just say that when we get the pages where we get Occupy AI introduced, it was where I had a lot of like marginal LOLs here.
Please.
I think like the back and forth between Tom and Liza is really funny.
Tom's like, it's a big word.
Yeah. Tom's like, how are you doing all this? And she removes a pair of Harlequin style ARs.
Amazing.
Right. She says, in the movie when the screenplay says computer stuff, the AI does all that. And I just sit here. Right. But like, obviously she's tired and obviously she's doing a lot, but it's like she can't, like, that's as much as she can muster for an explanation for Tom, who's like clearly borderline a Luddite, perhaps. Like,
yeah, he's too busy.
Yeah. And he's like, so she's explaining and he's like, so you spied to see if they'd be willing. And she's like, spied is a big word, right? We use the same data as Pepsi or the Democratic Party. I call it Occupy.
Yeah. We determined we needed a base of 5,000 good little unthinking, unquestioning revolutionaries so that if the AI asked them to act like chickens, there'll be 5,000 smelly hippies on the mall clucking in unison.
Yeah, so good.
Incredible.
I also thought when we get the description of it, right? So this is like a big page on kind of 507.
Yeah.
There's an interesting nod here to like past social movements, like Mark Lee or our omniscient narrator, right, is like sifting. The AI has sifted through the best and the brightest of the past 20 years of social movements, veterans of BLM, Idle No More, Sunrise, Extinction Rebellion, Occupy, and Standing Rock. And like indigenous resistance and community building is like a huge part of the siege. And it comes up a bit more in April 4th, but I think even just here in the nod to like which social movements you would want to recruit from because they know what to do is like really telling.
Absolutely. And that point gets made again. And I'm surprised that those are all social movements from our world as the readers, right? He, I assume, purposely chooses not to like throw in some social movements we've had mentioned like in passing in a headline splash or something, even though these are all 2010s, 2020s movements.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the evoking of Occupy too is, I think, really important, right?
Yeah.
We've talked a bit about like the different anarchist visions that are sometimes at work, and like, the Shane versus Kate approaches to undermining American democracy. But
For
I
sure.
think that was one of the things that, and Kate rejects one version of Occupy in the next section, right?
Yes, very much
Um,
so.
and so I think it's interesting to think about doing what Kate does under the guise of a kind of Occupy, like either kind of ideological framework, or just to deploy the strategy of occupation kind of itself.
Yes, because there are some parts of the siege here that are very much clearly drawn from Occupy and Standing Rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like about the medical tents, about the libraries, about the
Yeah.
classes, about the kitchens and feeding people and all of that. Like,
And the like chaining of people together to form a barrier
yeah.
that from violence, right? From the violence of the
Yes.
state.
Yes. And like the other call back that the omniscient narrator makes is to WTO protest, right? The like
Yeah.
sleeping dragon, the like chain of people in handcuffs and pipes.
Mm-hmm.
Which Liza did not like order the AI to do. The AI spontaneously did that.
The AI figured out that that
Mhm.
was the
The
most
correct tactic.
efficient
Yeah.
tactic. Yeah. Well, actually, I was unclear about that. We haven't quite got there yet, but like, did the AI figure that out, or did the AI assemble people who spontaneously figured that out at the moment? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll get there.
We will get there.
Do we want to flag anything else in April 1?
Just the kind of seeming collapse of it at the very
Yeah.
end, right? As they seeming like it fails at the next night or at the end of the first night or into the second day.
Yeah.
And
Commentators are tweeting jokes at her, right? The status quo is laughing. President doesn't bother coming home from a meeting of the G20. Everyone's like, let the rain get them, right?
yeah. And once it was down to the hundreds, they'd start making arrests.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say that my episode title comes from the very end of April 1st. And that is this idea that this is a, quote, complex and dangerous nonviolent ambush. So
Ooh,
my episode title proposal is a complex and dangerous nonviolent ambush.
that's really good. I actually think they work really well together.
I would agree.
Perfecto. Okay, so after April 1st, the narration, and that's where we get the Fire Festival joke too, which is
Yes.
really good. Fire Festival of the Climate Crisis. Right? Seth says we'd barely be able to summon a crowd the size of a poetry reading. And then Liza jokes that it's the Fire Festival.
Yeah.
And then we get a little more of Kate's internal monologue, perhaps. She's fending off an alarming sensation. What truly got her was this ego blow, the rebuttal of her entire thesis that she was a unique conduit for activating people's faith in themselves. That's what, that was a moment where I was like, does she think that? Like, I don't know.
That's it. I hadn't thought of it so directly before. I don't think she consciously thinks that, but I think that she unconsciously or affectively thinks that.
It's so interesting.
Or that's the like subterranean to herself and like notion of herself, like expectation. And I think the clue that I actually do believe that more than the, quote, death threats, the hate mail, the deep fake porn, the actual leaked sex video, and all the vicious internet bile, that like this failing, I do think it's true to the character Kate that a failure of this would be harder than all of those things on her, for her.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Cause then it's like, what was it all for?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not even like, it doesn't have to even be self-aggrandizing. It could be about the outcome. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So April 4th, should we start with a little one sentence summary of April 4th?
Yes.
Okay. I went with the occupation of DC builds to critical mass and Kate issues her demands to the state. Capital S.
I went with the siege swarm summons the divine and creates a living, growing, metamorphizing occupation of Capitol Hill, and they want unconditional surrender.
Surrender. Yours is way better. I was like not feeling very prosaic yesterday.
Yeah. I was inspired by whatever the fuck this narrator was, apparently.
I know. I think it's amazing. We just have to say, like, the opening line of April 4 got me so good. It's just like such a
It's biblical.
it's hard to say why the fourth day, its
Yeah.
own paragraph. Just like, wow. And on the fourth day, they came,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's so good.
It is. But again, it's like it's hard to say why the fourth day, who or what says
Yeah.
that. How do they have or whatever the ability to frame it and write it that way? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really funny. It's so good.
We find out they get to within 15,000 people within a week, right after being dwindling down to barely more than I keep wanting to call them the blue shirts, not the blue bands.
I know.
The blue bands is and a couple other 1,000 or two more stragglers.
Mm-hmm.
And then people start coming in. And then, to your point from a couple of minutes ago, it seems that the way this is narrated, the arrival of a bunch of indigenous nations,
it's like
is in some ways
huge
the
tipping
crucial,
point.
Precisely. Including that they are rewilding Washington, D.C. itself.
Yeah.
And that they've brought in all of these mature old growth trees to just jackhammer up the streets and plant.
Yeah. And
under the supervision of a Lakota blue band.
Right. And, Mark Lee even says bringing with them years of experience occupying and blockading, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like this literally could not have happened without this.
Yep.
They write the fire pit in the shape of a buffalo horn, and they plant rows of the national flags of all the represented tribes. It's really the kind of center of the occupation, I think, as Mark Lee / omniscient narrator has us understand the unfolding of the events, right? It's I think that's really fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. There's also, I
wonder, wait, can I ask?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a couple different reads of that. One is it's a kind of settler move to innocence to center indigenous people in a story like this of the siege, or there's a kind of nefarious read on how the AI infiltrates indigenous communities and sort of mines indigenous practices and histories for strategies to deploy for the siege. And also maybe it's a little bit of both.
I think a little bit of both. And I think the fact that Kate herself, right, is, her dad is Navajo and Jamaican, if I remember correctly, leaves all of those options available to her as a character.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think, telling that she's not really part of that at all, right? She stays, she walks the, encampment every day, right? But she's the executive committee.
Yeah, the general, walking through and reading all of the troops.
You know what I was thinking of? Katniss walking through the hospital at the end of the Hunger Games when she's also become the basically kind of figurehead face corporate, right? What do they call them? The propaganda face of the rebellion. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, and there is a lot of propaganda that's happening, but in a non-derogatory sense, or public relations campaign, right? So there's this point on, what is it, 510, 511, where they talk about how it was a purposeful decision to encourage people to bring their kids and stay there with their kids, because that would make it harder seemingly to convince or the state to violently break this up.
And that's arguably why there is such a heavy insistence on the nonviolence, right? And but we get that actually from the perspective of the administration, right? Love himself says
it'd be easier if they would riot.
It would be easy. Oh, the mayor of DC says it'd be easier if they were rioting, right? So it has the nonviolence has a strategic function,
absolutely,
in this particular action,
which I think tells us something about Mark Lee's position on violence and nonviolence, and that in that it's and this is Malcolm X's point. This is kind of Frantz Fanon's point. It's it's a strategic question and a historical question, right? Rather than it necessarily is a moral question. Right. It's also a moral question.
Fanon too, right?
Yeah. It's not a moral question for him at all. But I have to say, I did laugh really hard at Victor Love in the top
Mhm.
of 511.
Oh, yeah. I have LOL
Yeah.
huge in the margins
It's
there.
really disturbing, but really funny. Forging his political career through the Democratic Party, he'd had particular disdain for lefty agitators who couldn't organize a barbecue, let their trash pile up and the porta pots overflow. He would finish his Asia tour, and if they were still there by the time he got back, he'd start sharking them out with vomit gas.
It's so good.
Jesus
It's,
Christ.
like, fucked. Also, like, cute actions like this, so pejorative and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, and it's
Um,
in a time when like the mainstream Democratic Party is trying to shit on Zoran Mamdani as much
right.
as it can, like
Yeah, it
it's
feels
also
too on the nose.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, this page is interesting too because we get that seems very clearly like maybe he says that in private to his aides, but it also seems like a little bit of a glimpse into his thinking.
we do get glimpses into his thinking throughout, particularly the
Yeah.
April 4th part. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we get those two kind of recruits that you mentioned earlier, right? Like the anarchist from North Carolina, the researcher. What kind of researcher is she? Oh, she's
She,
studying the northern sea otter, right, from
yep.
Alaska. And then like Kelly is refusing to leave, right? And we get a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of kind of the how the AI works, but sort of from the perspective of the people targeted by it.
Yep, exactly. And as you pointed out, they then become data points mentioned later on in the chapter. And there's something about Bridget Zeckhauser in particular, the researcher, who is a perfect encapsulation of like Kate's whole deal, right? So
Yeah.
she'd been drowning in a lot of despair lately. And when she saw Morris take the stage for that speech, she had a real fuck it moment, packed her sleeping bag and tent, and was in DC 18 hours later.
Mm-hmm.
That's the precise kind of like disalienating activation that Kate thinks is the political strategy.
Yeah. What did you make that like here we start? I think there's reference to the problem of waste before, but on this page, it's sort of like recurring and it becomes central to like a central question to both the longevity and arguably like the efficacy of the
Yeah.
action. So
Mm-hmm.
like Love thinks waste is going to be the limit of like what will either make people stay or will make it convincing. And then
Yes.
the blue bands are like, or the organizers are like, this is the thing we know, right? We have to figure out how to handle. And it's like not, and it doesn't go to the same place that like Victor Love goes, that like if we fail
Correct.
to handle waste, we will make ourselves target of vomit gas. But like, what is the connection between failing to take care of the waste and becoming like legible or legitimate targets for the state's kind of security
Mm-hmm.
apparatus or for violence from the state
Mm-hmm.
is kind of, I think, maybe a question that's being sort of hinted at there.
Yeah. I mean, I actually read it more in terms of what Kate then says on the next page, that
Mhm.
the waste management and the fact that like they had to have a plan to deal with it and did, right? That they're like allies in the Clean Energy Labor Coalition, despite being under investigation. Like they were the bulk of the construction crews, and they got to work dealing with what organizers knew would be the key issue, waste disposal, right? And then it's the sanitation team cleaned the portable toilets and showers every hour, the refuse pumped into either nearby sewers or sanitation trucks, trash minimized, collected, recycled, and repurposed whenever possible. That there's something about the attention to like the most basic human like
Yeah.
needs that is a kind of like Marxist feminist point in some ways. It's like, well, what are the like what is required for the social reproduction on a bodily
Mhm.
level of the occupation and the siege? And it's a rejoinder or retort to Love. Well, the porta potties will overflow and
Right.
then we'll kill them. But then I
Right.
think it also prefigures like what Kate says, what you flagged us earlier, that Kate has no time for quote horizontal structures or autonomous
Mhm.
self-organization. And for her, I think those two things are linked. I think
Yeah.
for her, it's that if this was a horizontally structured, autonomously self-organizing occupation, they would not be taking care of the infrastructure of waste management.
Right. So there's, I think for Kate, like a really intentional tying of the material and like ideological needs of the siege, right?
Yes.
That is sort of introduced as a counter to kind of Love's configuration of the problem of waste disposal or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I think that Kate's tied or like shitting on
Mm-hmm.
to be purposeful about it. Autonomous self-organization is really funny, given that it's some combination of the AI like taking advantage of spontaneous organizing on page 512
Yeah.
into 513. That like people just started even before being prompted by the AI doing these like rolling like blockades
Yeah.
and rolling like shutdowns of traffic and such throughout DC. And then eventually the AI seizes on that and helps like facilitate that. But like those people spontaneously organizing are an incredibly helpful boon for the vertically structured
Yeah.
occupation.
But that's what I had thought was happening with the people linking themselves together. But maybe I would just collapse those two in my memory.
Yeah, my understanding was that the AI directed them to the
Okay.
intersection and said
Block
occupy it
this.
or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
block
yeah.
it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Meanwhile, Love just wants to horror drone them, which like we don't yet know what a horror drone is. I don't remember if we
mhm,
find out eventually or not.
mm-mm.
And then speaking of like getting a view into the internal monologue of Victor Love, he just wanted to get a few vodka tonics in him.
Yeah.
And then they made an executive order that let Zuritas be part of the quote unquote peacekeeping force
Yeah, it's crazy.
as they build these like floating brigs in Maryland to hold all these people. Which again, like to talk about reading this when we're reading it, like as the fucking like GOP loves their alligator Alcatraz, as they're calling it. To
Yeah.
think about like these floating brigs and the
Yeah, that
Potomac
felt
or whatever is
so on the
terrifying.
nose and scary.
Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe I will propose my theory here.
please.
This is going to take us to Climate X, but I think it is also a way to think about kind of like Kate's approach to waste management versus like Love's approach to, or desired approach to sort of
Mm-hmm.
responding to the siege. But I wanted us to look at the Climate X agenda itself. So this is on 517, right? Kate, the next day, I don't know exactly what next day, but the executive committee delivered a document to every major media organization. They declared the siege of the United States Capitol would come to an end when lawmakers agreed to enact a Climate X agenda, amnesty for everyone involved in the occupation, a repeal of PRIRA, the release of all political prisoners, and an investigation of all companies involved in obfuscating the science of and delaying action on climate change. Otherwise, they would slowly but surely bring the American government and economy to a halt. So we talked a bit about green capitalism in the last episode.
Yeah.
And I was thinking a little bit more about green democracy in this chapter or this early part of the siege, and particularly around like debates in EPT about like what parts of democracy can be greened or kind of what does an ecological democracy sort of look like. And
I
I know
I almost did, I think, where you're about to propose. So I'm
I don't
psyched for
know,
this.
maybe. I think there's a lot of new work, but I wanted to take us back to Eckersley on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was so close to prepping the like chapter in the Green State where she talks about deliberative democracy.
That's exactly what I was gonna do. Yeah. Yeah. This is excellent.
Great minds. Our own
So
swarm. Yeah.
yeah, we're the AI is feeding us back to each other. But I was thinking in particular about the section where she talks about the critiques of deliberative democracy from kind of both a feasibility side and a desirability side, on the grounds that it's either like too ideal or too dispassionate.
Mm-hmm.
And her kind of defense of it as what she calls a counterfactual ideal.
Uh-huh.
Right. So she says, those who attack the feasibility of deliberative democracy tend to misunderstand the role of a counterfactual ideal in providing an alternative and critical vantage from which to evaluate and seek to reconstruct political institutions. As a counterfactual ideal, deliberative democracy is necessarily something that is juxtaposed to and therefore at some distance from the real. The point is to highlight what could happen if certain conditions prevail. As a device for exposing what could be otherwise, the discourse ethic provides a potent critical vantage point from which to unmask unequal power relations and the political actors who sanctify them, identify issues in social groups that are excluded from public dialogue, and sift out genuinely public interests from merely vested private interests. However else one wishes to defend it, I take this critical vantage point argument to constitute its unimpeachable core. So I think that that is an interesting way to potentially think about the siege as a critical vantage point from which to critique the security state.
Amazing.
And first, in part one, in the literal dismantling of the security, the physical security apparatus and infrastructure, and putting it to work kind of for the siege, but also technologically, right? That Occupy AI is not just targeting potential kind of foot soldiers, but it is disrupting the communication channels of the security apparatus itself. And like, it seems like feeding it disinformation. So like the Occupy AI is disrupting the security apparatus AI, right? To some degree. So like,
I think that's a correct way to put it. Yes.
But also I think we're getting into really sticky territory here, whereas like do multiple AIs, like how do we to kind of put a pin in something that I was thinking about in your theory, like when do we want to start thinking about the agency of the AI, A, in our world, but B, in the world of the novel, and like the kind of consequences, whether political, material, or moral, of those like agents, potential plurality of agencies. Mm-hmm. But I think even here, right, like that the Occupy AI is kind of like offering a critical vantage point from which to undermine or critique the AI of the security apparatus is another layer of kind of what this counterfactual ideal is actually doing in this chapter, right? And that just on the nitty gritty stuff, right? That they've provided food, shelter, waste disposal, recycling, right? All of these things that are thought to cost a ton of money, to be exclusively the purview of a like really technologically advanced society, and not just technologically in that like it has an AI at its disposal, but technologically advanced, I think, in terms of like infrastructure. And the siege occupation is not infrastructurally technologically savvy or advanced, right? People are camping in tents. Some people have erected like kind of wooden structures that I think are supposed to look sort of like not like anything we would recognize as shelter necessarily, right? So there is a kind of primitivism to the physical infrastructure at the same time as it's being kind of supported by this really technologically savvy artificial intelligence infrastructure. And then I think even in these demands, right, they're both ideal and realistic. They're realizable, but like not in the current, like the specific current moment where the president is the former head, but maybe still actually controls in some way the biggest security contracting company and has at his disposal, right, an arsenal of weapons that maybe we don't even know exist or understand how they work, right? And we now know came to power primarily through mobilizing a sort of nefarious version of what Liza has put together to get this occupation sort of off the ground. So like we know that Victor Love is not going to say, great, let's begin the investigation, release the prisoners, and tomorrow we will put together the new energy plan, the new labor plan, the new whatever plan. Like we know that, right? But also at the same time, these are not merely idealistic demands, right? So like the relationship between the feasibility of them and the like the desirability of them isn't a perfect one-to-one, but it is really, I think it speaks to some other stuff that like Eckersley talks about in other places in the book, right? That like this idea that if democracy is premised on limitlessness, it's never going to be green. It's never going to be ecological, right? If freedom is premised on limitlessness, it will never be green. It will never be ecological. It will never be just, right? And so there are all these other like values that matter to doing something that is ecologically democratic that cannot be met, right, in the current confines. But it does not mean that they are impossible, unreachable, or not worth sort of organizing around or defending kind of rigorously with philosophical arguments, right? So I think like in a way, we could read the siege as kind of like an experiment in realizing the feasibility of political demands that otherwise seem to be like merely utopian and kind of like distracting from the question of what we could actually do in favor of the question of what we would ideally do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is another way of, I think, cutting across the debate between like ideal philosophy and grounded philosophy or something like that, right?
That's brilliant. I mean, it takes us back to our discussion of the waste management and the infrastructure. But even I'm thinking of, this is probably just a page or two before you launched off of. This is 515,
Mm-hmm.
where the omniscient narrator talks about like, okay, so they said no drugs, but people are going to be people, right?
Yeah.
There was music everywhere. People were having sex. There was like sex noises of stifled and not stifled. And there's something about the reality and the humanity of the siege camp that does some of that cutting across. Like
Mm-hmm.
Markley himself, or dropping us into a conversation 100 page earlier where there's like a secret in-person meeting with everything in Faraday bags between Kate and Liza and
Mm-hmm.
Seth and whomever about how this would all work is very different than like people having sex in the tents, right,
Mm-hmm.
amidst the camps as they're dealing with how to manage all this infrastructure and waste management and everything. And I mean, I don't know if this speaks to you at all, but like in that particular paragraph where the narrator is talking about like the musician and the sex and the drugs, I was reminded of the kind of paragraph of The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, where like
Mm.
the narrator of that, who directly addresses the reader, right? The like, you know, if you need to imagine,
Yeah.
right, drugs, imagine drugs, like the Drews. If you need there to be beer, do you need an orgy to believe this? Then here are your orgies. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like something about that, except that Markley comes down on the side of like Jemison in The Ones Who Stay and Fight more
Mm-hmm.
so than he does on the side of Le Guin in The Ones
Yeah.
Who Walk Away.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really good.
I want to point out maybe two things from very quickly. Like one is we get this introduction of Letitia Hamilton
Yeah.
on 514 to 15. And like this is similar to your question about the introduction of the various indigenous nations. There's
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit of the like quote unquote magical Negro trope that's
Yep.
happening here with Letitia Hamilton, just to like I was wondering if you got any of that at all or find like
Yeah.
overreading.
No, and I think like there's more of her than there
Yes.
are of the other people that get kind of folded into
Mm-hmm.
the siege, right? Like, right. So we know that some people were actively recruited, that they were part of the like original kind of blue band infrastructure. Some people just are stuck there, right? And like we don't get a clear sense of how Letitia Hamilton gets there. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be like through the AI in any way,
No.
right?
Mm-mm.
And like she just sees things happening, right? And is like, I don't really understand the whole climate thing, whatever. But she is, I mean, she is like savvy for a kid.
Yes.
She has street smarts. Her internal
Mm-hmm.
monologue suggests also like some really high level of kind of basic intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
um,
And humor, right,
and
as well.
humor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like she plays the white ladies, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think there's definitely that going on. And that she's a kid is, I think, really
Yeah,
part of the whole thing too. Like I hope, and part of me is like, is someone gonna like save her? You know?
yeah. No comment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect foreshadowing. And then on 516 and 17, we get a real gut punch after the previous Matt chapter that Coral was a
Yep.
rat all along.
Yeah. And
And
Kate knew.
yes, all
Yeah.
along, or at least since 2030.
Yeah.
You know, and we did a lot of cryptic foreshadowing around Coral last chapter,
Mhm.
right? Like, so I was looking back over the lines. It's their story of their dad, like hiding the motorcycle, right, in the friend's garage. And it's like,
Yeah.
is Coral kind of like
Trying to tell
confessing,
Matt.
right?
Yeah.
That they have this secret, just like their dad had this major, like,
Yeah.
secret that would shock on the level of like a death. And then, of course, you know, we talked about it for, you know, spoiler reasons, this line that they had about, we don't see the people we love with clarity. I'm not being
Mhm.
subtle here. They're not being subtle about that because they're talking about Kate, right? Or referencing
Right.
Kate to Matt. But here too, they are confessing to Matt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So just like
Ugh,
real intense. Although
so
like
sad.
Matt gets investigated as well.
Yeah.
Kate was very happy it wasn't Matt that was the snitch.
But we
Although,
also know that Kate has known about the affair.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that it
There's more
bothered her
meaning there.
more than she would have liked.
I think it's interesting that we just learned that Kate hired a firm, but we
Yeah.
don't know what that means. And that
Right.
somehow those investigations are all, I guess, super top secret and like hidden
Yeah.
in some way from whatever else these AIs are doing, which to
Seriously.
me feels like how.
Yeah. And this is in the midst of doing, I think, some really important character work on the people who are absent and the people who are present, right? There's
Yeah.
this line that Tom has at the top of 516, because if he, meaning Matt, split, it meant he really thought you figured it out. When I told Rakia what you were planning, it's like both of them knew you and Liza were for real with this. That's what scared them, right? Like
Yeah.
they aren't the real ones enough, and that they were scared by this. And the identifying of Rakia and Matt is, I think, a notable from Tom.
Yeah.
Who it is / was engaged to Rakia, and like I think it's clear he and Matt never like quite clicked.
Right. Yeah.
So
there's a trust thing there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last kind of big reveal, I guess, or there's two kind of things.
Yeah.
We get the discussion of the other people coming to the siege,
which is also a discussion of AI.
Yeah.
And
militiamen, skinheads, neo-Nazis, the American Patriot League hiking over the Potomac, assault rifles shouldered, right? The previous fall, a powerful new recruitment tool had exploded onto the internet, an AI of unknown origins. Camped out in chat rooms and VR worldies, found young white men, went to work on them, like Liza's app, right?
Exactly.
And in the guise of a gorgeous young woman or older mentor, inked a portrait of a world in which they were in danger.
Yeah. Fascinating that those were the two options.
I know. And then also Holly gets here.
And even before Holly gets there, I love the line when Holly gets there. But even for that, we find out that the quote unquote community grant programs of law enforcement is arming the white supremacist militias, that military contractors like Zuritas are training the white supremacist militias, and that Attorney General Greenstreet in the DOJ is behind all of it, using the militias to quote unquote go after 6 degrees, but while, having some undercover informants to keep an eye on them and make sure they don't do anything too outrageous, which is terrifying. But then Holly arrives. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to propose a cultural artifact to think through that whole configuration of like the DOJ and kind of like in conflict with the DC mayor, right? So the DC mayor is directing all the cops to like basically patrol the paramilitary forces. Yeah. And this is where we get also like Andrea Sanchez saying like, fine, I recognize these people as enemies, right? And then the DC mayor says he would not let the new civil war everyone had been predicting for so long break out in his city.
Wait, did we also almost choose the same cultural artifact?
Probably. I want to propose Alex Garland's 2024 movie Civil War.
I love this so much. I did have that written in my doc at one point.
Yeah, and then I also, in the next part, the very last page, we get Quentin for a moment in real time, and he gets the reporter kind of trains the camera on him, and he gives kind of like a woo-woo answer to like what are we all doing here, which is
his
really
answer
really good.
Gave me the shivers. I must
it's
say.
So good.
Yeah.
But like he talks about saving a people from annihilation, which made me think of the Alex Garland adaptation of Annihilation. So I was like, okay, Alex Garland's just going to frame these last few pages for us. Yeah. But Civil War, I think in particular, is really apt here because the movie, I read a lot of critiques of it that it like doesn't actually come down on like who's the bad guy in the US. Yeah. And for me, I was like, that's what I loved about it. I thought that was so not the point.
Yes. Shared brain here.
Yeah. There's like at least 3 different ways to read what it's up to. One is just like painting a portrait for what it's like for people in the US who've never lived during a war of what it would be like to live during a war, right? Yes. Because we are involved in wars in all kinds of other places where other people live, but none of us who are not part of the military have ever lived in a war zone. So like just to put that, to set it in a place that's like recognizably the US and to like make the audience sit with a few minutes for like what that would be like. And like to maybe have that invite some self-reflection as to like what kind of wars we support. I think that's one possible read.
I'm with you on that one.
The other possible read is that it sort of doesn't matter whether like one army or the other army is sort of being helmed by like a good guy or a bad guy, like on the ground, it's really hard to, I mean, I'm thinking like James Scott here, right? Like that, like wars are not always about like the generals, and in fact, almost never, right?
Yeah.
And are almost never about the heads of state. Like a lot of what happens during a war is like on the ground, people working out skirmishes that predate the start of the war, like old grievances, right? That there's a lot more locality and like and muddledness to war in real time than like what we think of when we think about, I don't know, like strategy or something like that. And I feel like that movie does a really good job of showing people who are idealistic, people who are opportunists, people who are like really strongly hold kind of beliefs that justify or legitimate violence, right? And people who don't. And like to just look at the messiness of it kind of again in the context of like a place that some kind of cultural hive mind perceives to be a place where we aren't at war or where we are free or something, I think is really good. But like that the first thing that would happen in an American context is that everyone would be fucking armed is like obviously so true.
Yes.
And we see that happening here, even at a time where there's a really, really, really strong security state. And actually, it seems like there is no real threat to the executive power at all, right?
No.
Like the DC mayor doesn't even know what the fuck is going on with the DOJ. We know from the last chapter that Love has kind of consolidated a lot of like DOJ and other kinds of agencies like under the umbrella of what used to be kind of his corporation, right? And like, or in terms of like what they do. And so like we know that sovereignty here in the security state sense or monopoly on the legitimate use of violence sense isn't being contested. But and still everyone's like, too many people have guns, right? Like what's going to happen here? And I think this chapter ends on like a very ominous note in that sense, that we almost end with the paramilitary groups is like very, very scary. And this like new civil war, seems to really not be that far on the horizon. And I think that Alex Garland did a really great job with that movie. I don't typically like war movies, but I thought that one was really, really well done for all the questions that it raises and all the difficult things that it makes a specifically American audience kind of confront. And I think it pairs really nicely with this chapter.
I co-sign 100% of what you just said. The people that like complain that movie needed to get more into the intricacy of the politics of it, like completely miss the point of that movie and of like film in general.
And of film. They don't know how to watch movies, so get out of here. Yeah.
But no, that I thought Civil War was absolutely incredible. The Jesse Plemons scene, right? Like in particular, was playing in my mind at several points throughout and will continue playing in my mind over the rest of the novel, actually.
Yeah. Should we talk about Quentin's little soliloquy?
Sure. What would you like to say about it? Before that, my other possible, I'm not sure if there's going to be an episode title or like intro thing, is that Holly Beatrice arrives and Kate's like, you fucking awesome nuclear bitch.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty incredible stuff from Kate.
That could have been a good way to describe ourselves. Yeah. We're awesome nuclear bitches. I also think it's really funny that Holly's like, it smells here. Like, I know we're working on it.
Yes.
And like we get Holly from her journey in. So we follow her kind of like observing the encampment and like we follow the smell, right? Because that's something that she notes throughout.
I learned a new word from the narrator, the mephitic kind of stench. Of trash portable toilets and trench latrines. Like also some great alliteration in that sentence. Again, this narrator, who or whatever it is very self-conscious about the writing.
It's very, very funny.
If we can ascribe consciousness to whatever this narrator is.
This chapter is boggling my mind.
True.
So Quentin, Kate's like, moral suasion hasn't worked. Electoral politics hasn't worked. All we have left is revolt. And Quentin's like, I don't know. Maybe I think about it a little different.
Let's see. Okay. Sure, this is an act of physical rebellion, but that can't be all it is. It's got to be spiritual. It's got to be about an immaterial force within us. To save one life is to save all of humanity, right? ever heard that? That's the Holy Quran. But it applies across all faiths and non-faiths. So to save a species from extinction, a people from annihilation, if that's not summoning the divine, I don't know what is.
So good.
It's really good. The material force, obviously, I was thinking back to the Kathleen Stewart that I had been thinking about earlier, but also just the two sides of like the secular and the post-secular, right? Understanding of what's happening here and putting them back to back, and then having Kate responding, yeah, I'm a little less frou-frou than that. It's really good. It's just really good.
It's like, but he likes that, you know? It
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wait, who's the he there? Quentin or Markley?
Quentin, I think. Yeah. But who knows? Yeah. And then we end with somewhere near the Washington Monument, people were dancing. The Capitol's bright dome still shone in the wine tinted twilight. Yeah. So another description of kind of like the night sky. Yeah. Man, this is good.
It's good. Yeah. This book, it's good.
It's good.
A conclusion that we've come to.
Did we miss anything?
I don't think so.
We got it all.
I think we got it all. Up next.
See, it worked.
Yeah, I totally agree. Up next, The Siege.
Part 2. Yeah.
Part 2.
set beginning on May 20th.
Yeah. May 20th.
Yeah, the only other date, what we know that like Holly arrived on May 4th, I think. So I think we're jumping pretty far ahead here.
Yes. Yeah. Although, like,
maybe not.
The May 20th entry will do the time thing that you had already identified of like backfilling and forward looking.
Okay. Oof, man, we're getting into temporality here.
When have we not? I think we've been there since literally that was a major theme on the first episode of this podcast.
Oh, well, we're keeping it going.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on We Are the Deluge.
And as Kate said, we are the Deluge.